I'm just saying we're moving on into organic. Why would you want to add something that ends with side? Pesticide, herbicide, fungicide, side. That's the same suffixes in suicide, homicide, and genocide. Why would you put stuff like that on your food?
This is A New Angle, and I'm your host, Justin Angle, marketing professor at the University of Montana. This podcast is my chance to speak with cool people doing awesome things in and around the great state of Montana. We are proudly underwritten by First Security Bank and Blackfoot Communications. Hey folks, welcome back and thanks for tuning in today. Today's episode is a conversation with Winona LaDuke. Winona is an internationally renowned activist, economist, and organizer working on sustainable development, renewable energy, and smarter, more secure food systems. She's also a two-time United States vice presidential candidate, running both times with Ralph Nader. Winona recently visited the University of Montana to give the Presidential Lecture Series address. It was great to get some time with her and to dig into important issues facing not only tribal communities, but our broader society as well. Winona certainly pulls no punches in this conversation, and she has the courage to question, if not outright discard, some of the basic assumptions guiding our politics and our economy. There's a lot to learn from here, and I'm excited to bring you our conversation right now. Winona, welcome to Missoula, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you braved some intense weather to get here, but it sounds like, somebody from northern Minnesota, it's just nothing new for you.
Yeah, no, Fargo in northern Minnesota, it's a little colder, a little windier coming out of Fargo. It's when you hit my woods, I live out in the woods in the middle of the White Earth Reservation, and when you hit the woods, you're like, oh, that's why we live here and not in the middle of the northern plains, so we're good.
Exactly. So welcome. You're here for the Presidential Lecture Series address this evening, and we're just really grateful to have some of your time and to talk about your amazing work. I think that kind of some of my first touch points with your work, obviously when you were vice presidential candidate with Ralph Nader, that was my first sort of recognition of your name and your role, but started to grow more familiar with your work through some of the pipeline protests and Honor the Earth. And yeah, it's just amazing to have you here. And I'd love to talk about kind of the road you took to get into your work as an organizer, as a leader, as an economist. Heard in other interviews, you sort of haven't been enamored to the term activist, but a lot of people have used that term to describe your work.
Just starting with the term activist, I just consider myself a responsible human being.
Okay.
And I kind of look at this big picture, and so I spend a lot of time trying to protect water. And I feel like wanting the right to water is a human right. Mm-hmm. And defending that right to water shouldn't make me an activist. That should make me a human being that wants water. And I do rankle at the term a little bit, and I'm wondering why corporations who are going to contaminate your water aren't called terrorists.
Yeah, good point.
And that's a Montana question. Certainly. Mm-hmm. There's certainly a huge amount of contamination from mining companies in Montana. And to me, I want to be the person who can, I live in a place where you can still drink the water from a lake. My job is try to keep it that way. I've spent most of my life, I'm a rural development economist. I also farm. Mm-hmm. Smaller scale, I'm a heritage corn, bean, squash, tobacco, Jerusalem artichokes, and potato girl, along with basil, because I happen to like pesto sauce a lot.
Yeah.
And so I've done that for most of my life, and I am now a hemp farmer too.
Okay. Yeah, so I definitely want to talk about the hemp stuff.
Right, I do. I grow industrial fiber hemp.
Okay.
That's my goal. So I'm interested in how, what our communities are going to be like 50 years from now, 30 years from now. Who's in charge of that? Mm-hmm. Where your water's going to come from, where your energy is going to come from, where your food's going to come from, how we're going to treat each other, and who makes those decisions. It's not just a native issue. It's really issues of how democracy is practiced, or how we're going to survive, frankly, in the face of climate change and the catastrophic ecological challenges that we now face.
So when was the seed first planted for this type of engagement, this type of leadership? I mean, I know you did your undergraduate at Harvard, studied economics, and then is that the point where you moved to the White Earth Reservation permanently?
Yes, that's right. Well, I come from a good family to start with, and both of my parents were my mother still is. My mother's name is Betty LaDuke, and she's an artist, and she has always worked kind of in the arena of art and social change. She's 86 and does pretty much 6x6 or 8x10 paintings.
Wow.
Yeah. She's pretty much rocking it still. She's been up in a number of places have had her art, but so I was raised in a family that said, you should speak up against injustice. You should be present. I was taken out of school for anti-war demonstrations. I, was raised around farm workers. I was born in East LA, and we mostly hung out with the Native people and the farm workers there. So I have kind of, I have good family, good parenting.
Yeah.
Good values. And so, as you are correct, I left Southern Oregon, small town in Southern Oregon, and moved to Boston or Cambridge to go to school. I was politicized then kind of in the larger arena. At that time, the Indigenous people were first going to the United Nations. The UN Conference on the Rights of Indigenous People occurred in 1977 in Geneva. It was on the rights of Indigenous people of the land of the Western Hemisphere. It was the first UN conference, United Nations Conference on the Rights of Indigenous People, and I had been a researcher. In high school, I debated energy policy, and my first case that I actually studied was the Amex Coal Company moving into Northern Cheyenne Reservation, wanting to lease most of the reservation in violation of BIA leasing standards, and the Northern Cheyenne's tribes battle against coal strip mining politicized me quite a bit. So my initial studying of energy policy was really here in Montana.
Sure.
And then I, kind of came to this point where I, to me, these are questions, do large multinationals get to determine the future of your community? That's the question that I've asked pretty much my whole life. And why do they get to determine it? And, it's not only that the table isn't set so that we're all at the same table. We don't have any silverware. We don't even have a plate.
Right.
If it's not an even level playing field. But more, it's these questions of who gets to determine the future of these communities and the long-term economic and environmental impact of a lot of mega projects that have occurred. So I've spent most of my life fighting stupid ideas. Let's just be honest about it. Coal gasification plants, big mega dam projects, oil and gas leasing, nuclear waste dumps, and now pipelines. But I'm far more interested in the solutions.
Right.
And so I've, also spent a good deal of time on that, and now I'm ready for the next economy.
And so,
all ready for it.
And so, speaking of that, like your grounding as an economist, in your experience, how has the discipline of economics both helped and hurt in terms of the issues that you've been engaged in?
Well, basically, I went to Harvard, and the economics paradigm that is taught and replicated in most universities, I assume here is dead wrong. It's dead wrong.
Okay.
It's predicated on an endless growth economy. We've run out of stuff to pillage. Let's just be honest. Everything that we're extracting now, the energy return on investment, EROI, it's pretty low. That's what fracking is. Mm-hmm. Bottom of the barrel, might as well go down there, send 602 chemicals down there, bust up the bedrock of Mother Earth, and see if you can get some oil or gas out of there. That's crazy stuff. I call it Wendigo economics, cannibal economics. And so the paradigm of capitalism, the UN came out this fall and basically said for the planet to survive, capitalism has to die. Interesting moment in history. And so I feel like business schools should teach ecological economics. Mm-hmm. I feel like business schools should teach equitable economics, not how how a CEO's salary is 214 times that higher than an average worker. What's right about that? So, I'm interested in, economics is really, to me, it's about wealth for a community. It's not necessarily about the cash dollar, and it's certainly not about, how much stuff you're exporting. It's really about, the quality of life. I'm interested in these as you're probably familiar, there's the GNP indicators that we generally use in, to denote the quality of our economic wealth in this country. But
sure.
On a worldwide scale, they're looking at things more like gross national happiness, or Happy Planet indexing. Thoughtful, innovative countries are looking at, what we really want. And having a bunch of money and stuff doesn't actually make you happy. Just look at America.
Yeah, particularly when that money and stuff is concentrated in very few hands.
Well, no, I'm looking at, I don't know what farming communities you're looking at, but I'm looking at farms in northern Minnesota that used to have cows. Then the dairy termination program cleaned them out. They moved all the cattle to, all the dairy cows over to California. And so then now you have those large farms and large buildings. There's no livestock out there on a lot of our farms. They're all filled with people's boats and trailers. They're storing people's stuff. And so I'm just kind of looking at like, what kind of a rural economy is that?
Sure.
Where's your food coming from? We spend a lot of time taking care of our stuff. I mean, you look at Annie Leonard's movie, I don't know if you've ever seen it, called The Story of Stuff.
I have not.
That's like, 90% of the stuff that we make is like garbage within 6 months. Mm-hmm. So that economic model and paradigm is really not only not sustainable, but it's downright stupid over the long haul. And so I'm someone who's interested in the next economy. And, indigenous economics, because indigenous economics are land-based economics. And those, I live in a place where we got wild rice from the same lake for 10,000 years. You let me know what American can say that they've done anything sustainably for more than 10 years.
Right.
You show me an example.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we could learn something from indigenous people. That's kind of my thinking. And I'd like to see these economic schools kind of like get out of the box that they're in, because it's a suffocating box. Time to just kind of stick your head up and look around.
Try some new things.
Mm-hmm. Think about getting out of your box,
So there's this. I'm going to make an assumption that there's potentially a tension in your work. There's so much dedicated to stopping pipelines, for example. Yet, at the same time, you're talking about some real solutions, actionable solutions that can be implemented at a community level. Potentially can be scaled up to a national level. How do you kind of balance the saying no to bad ideas with saying, you should be paying attention to good ideas, and here's some good ideas? Good
question. I mean, there was a great Dakota philosopher and prophet, I would say. His name was John Trudell.
Okay.
He passed away a couple of years ago, but he used to say, people would ask me, how come I don't garden? And he said, because someone has to keep the beast out of the garden. That's me. Mm-hmm. And so I spend a lot of my time making sure that we can still harvest wild rice. My community, I worked with people in my community to stop the genetic engineering of wild rice. The state of Minnesota, the University of Minnesota wanted to genetically engineer wild rice. And I was like, seems like wild should mean something.
And explain why that's a bad thing.
First of all, we have, lakes and rivers that, you can harvest wild rice in the same lake and same river for 10,000 years. Mm-hmm. If you take care of your water. And in fact, rice comes back. My partner, just to say that there's an example of a lake that the rice had been drowned out by recreational interests of summer cottage owners.
Okay.
Is that you got the picture of this, right?
I got it.
So they kept the water levels high, drowned out the rice.
So there's no cycle.
Yeah, there's water levels were too high for the rice. Drowned it out for 17 years, in another case for 50 years. And when the water levels lowered in a drought, the rice came back. So what's that teach you? To me, that teaches you about the promise and the resilience of seeds. Mm-hmm. Teaches you something about how the creator and those plants will come back if they got a shot, which is a pretty lucky thing for us, being the Anthropocene, anthropocentric people we are. All about us. But, so in their push to genetically engineer wild rice, what they wanted to do is to, I don't know, whatever they want to do. But, the point is that...
they want to sell seeds every year. Right.
They want to have Terminator seeds, the whole thing. And so we don't want that contaminating our rice beds.
Sure.
So I would go to these meetings with the university and they were talking about academic freedom. And I'd say, well, what about academic responsibility? How's that work?
Yeah, talk more about that.
I mean, what I'm saying is like, you don't get to do human tests anymore on people just because you want to. Mm-hmm. And so in the end, we ended up with a piece of legislation in the state of Minnesota. It took us 7 years that requires a full environmental and cultural impact assessment before they can introduce any GMO rice. They've never, and they never will. They never will. So it's an example of, sometimes I just really think, just super honest with you, there's a bunch of white guys who want to do a bunch of stuff. And it's kind of like, I've raised a lot of sons. And it's kind of like, just because you want to, don't mean you get to.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of ideas that you could talk to like that are like, hey, let me try this. All those pictures of, all those guys doing dumb stuff. I mean, you know what I'm saying? This is like, hey, let me do this. Let me do this.
Sure.
Someone needs to be their mother and say no. And that's what I kind of feel like. It's like, I'm like, no, you shouldn't do that. Someone needs to put some boundaries. So, I've spent a lot of time, I've worked, my whole life at it, but I work with a lot of people in defeating some bad projects. But, at the same time, I'm interested in the next economy. And so, I'm looking at things like the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
Is this opportunity to look at that in a federal policy arena. But I'm just going to go back to saying that in our teachings as Anishinaabe people, there's this prophecy. And that prophecy is called the time of the seventh fire. And in that time, we're told as Anishinaabe people that we will have a choice between two paths. One is well-worn, but it is scorched. And the other is not well-worn and it's green. Mm-hmm. And we were told that we would have a choice upon which path to embark. I actually think that's America's situation. And so you are at this crossroads. And I'm spending a lot of time, right now I've been fighting the Enbridge pipelines, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
It's 5 years of my life on that, and they don't have pipeline. And, so what their proposals would do would affect my, all of our quality of life. And so, the economics of their idea is bad. Risk's bad.
Yeah.
So I spend a lot of time talking about that, but more than that, I'm like capitalizing the next economy. That's what I'm doing in my community.
So let's talk about these pipelines briefly, because I want to spend a lot of time on the new economy that you envision, the next economy. But at the same time, people should understand from your perspective, why are these pipelines bad? Why are they worth fighting? What are the negative impacts, both at the community level, but in aggregate, what do they represent?
Right. I mean, and it's interesting to talk about that in such a fossil fuels dependent state as Montana. I've been to coal strip, what a monstrosity of coal generation. So basically, let's just be honest, we're at the end of the fossil fuel era. People can say whatever they want to, but time to move on. Mm-hmm. I'd really like a graceful transition. I'm not someone that feels like I want to crash and burn my way out. I like a little prior planning.
Sure. We're at a stage where we can make choices. No time like the present to make a couple, 40 or 50 important choices. Mm-hmm. And so we're looking at infrastructure. We're a country that has a D in infrastructure. Yeah.
Crumbling stuff everywhere. I'm not sure what's crumbling in Montana, but we had a bridge, in Minnesota. But you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, it's happening.
And I feel like, and it's going to get worse with climate change. You got torrential storms. Mm-hmm. You got big
harder
winds.
Stresses on everything.
Everything is stressful. And we're not prepared. And I feel like, I live in a first world country. And I don't want to feel like I'm not living in a first world country. I want infrastructure for people.
Sure.
Not for oil companies, And so you're looking at a situation where, based on America's inefficient use of energy and a huge amount of peddling by dealers, fossil fuel companies, we'll just call them that, mm-hmm. You end up in a situation where you got a lot of, they're transitioning this plan out of Venezuela, although we'll probably be taking over Venezuela's oil reserves pretty soon, judging by the Trump administration's actions.
Gosh.
Largest oil reserves in the world are in Venezuela, largest. And so they had to replumb to get oil out of Canada. That's the tar sands. And so they're replumbing the oil infrastructure. And so there was 5 pipelines.
Right, and tar sands, it's not
that's the bottom
easy
of the barrel.
Oil to get.
No, that's like the bottom of the barrel.
Right.
Like the carbon impact is huge. The water impact is huge. The health impact is huge. It's pretty much, Canada's like cancer. The tar sands.
Yeah. And they're cutting down important forests to access it. And it's, just the extraction there is devastating alone, but the implications of these pipelines too.
Right. I just want to say, in a bigger picture, a lot of my problems originate in Canada. Everybody always acts like Canada's like all full of cool things,
sure.
like, healthcare, education.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But the downside of that is that's been capitalized off of extractive industries. So 70% of the world's mining corporations are Canadian. The big guys that are human rights violations, Canadian. Dams failures, Canadian. Pipelines, Canadian.
Right.
Canada doesn't have a plan B for its economy. Just look at Alberta. Mm-hmm. Just north of you. Not a single plan. So anyway, to make a long story short, there was 5 big pipelines proposed out of Canada 2 years ago. One was called Energy East, going from Alberta to New Brunswick. One was called Northern Gateway. One was called Trans Mountain. One was called Keystone.
Okay.
And one is called Line 3. Got to get that landlocked oil out. Energy East, going across Canada, longest pipeline, never got approved by the National Energy Board. Second pipeline, Enbridge's Northern Gateway, huge opposition, didn't get approved by the National Energy Board, leaving 3 pipelines, right? Those 3 pipelines, one's called Trans Mountain. I don't know if you watched what happened in Trans Mountain, but Kinder Morgan, company out of Texas, wanted to put in the pipeline, moving ahead, huge opposition. Hundreds of people getting arrested, white people, not just Native people.
Yeah.
Full on getting arrested in British Columbia. Nobody wants that pipeline, turns out there. And so they said, we got to sort this out. We're going to take a step back. In the meantime, there's lawsuit filed against them by the First Nations. Well, anyway, the Canadian government, Trudeau, buys that pipeline. I don't know if you saw this. Bought this pipeline in the fall. I can't remember. It was in September, maybe, for $4.9 billion. The next day, the court ruled that all the permits were null and void because they hadn't consulted with First Nations. So Premier Trudeau just bought they're saying it's a $15 billion pipeline. They might as well just call it the Trudeau pipeline.
Okay.
Leaving 2
So
pipelines.
they nationalize it.
They nationalized it. And,
Yet,
and they don't have any approval still.
Okay. At the national level, they have no. So
They have no
intergovernmental conflict here. Trudeau
have no-
nationalizes it, and the regulatory agencies say
No, the courts.
permit.
The courts said
got
that
it.
there was no approval for
Okay.
they null and void. And then that leaves 2 pipelines, right? One is called Keystone. And as you know, Obama did not grant the cross-border permits based on climate change.
Right.
As you also know, when Trump came in, he waved his magic wand and made it go. And the court here in Montana, right, ruled that he couldn't just use his magic wand.
He can't just reverse a previous presidential
he has to have a
decision.
reason.
Right.
And so, how did climate change under the Trump? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's an interesting moment. The Montana court decision also said that that the use of the pipe yards were biasing. Now I'm looking at that for Minnesota because the 5th pipeline is Line 3.
The use of the pipelines were biasing.
No, the pipe yards.
Yards.
If you roll out your infrastructure and pretend like you got this, that biases the EIS process.
Okay.
Interesting question.
Okay.
So I'm looking at that in Minnesota because I'm facing seven pipe yards. And they've been out there we defeated them in 2016 on a pipeline known as the Sandpiper, and now we're looking at them in this other pipeline, which is Line 3. And, we're in a pitched regulatory battle. The state of Minnesota just sued them as well to overturn permits. And we'll see. We'll see. But, people say, is it going to look like Standing Rock in Minnesota? I said, I don't know. It's probably going to be a little different because there's no line built. And why would I wait? Why would I wait till they get to my reservation? So I spent a lot of time fighting stupid ideas, but, and the pipelines are really a question of where we're going to go, America. You're going to keep shoving dirty oil down or you want to move into something else. I mean, an electric car is 65% efficient. 65%.
No, a gas car's like 15%.
16%.
Yeah.
So why would you want to be dumb people and ride around in 16% efficient vehicles when you could, have an electric car that, gets around? And so I think that there's a huge opportunity to not be stupid. I'd like to take it.
I like that.
It's like me. No time like the present to quit doing stupid stuff,
A New Angle is underwritten by First Security Bank and Blackfoot Communications, 2 cool companies doing awesome things all over Montana.
This is University of Montana President Seth Bodner, and you're listening to A New Angle.
And so that's one big piece of it is let's not do stupid stuff. Stop stupid stuff from happening.
Yeah.
But we've talked about this before. You've got some strong ideas about good ideas. The next economy. What does the next economy look like in your community? And then how do some of those ideas scale up?
The next economy is relocalized. Right. We all live here, but the fact is that why would you ship food 1,400 miles from a farmer to a table? Why would you try to ship food in the time of climate change with all that additional fossil fuels lathered on it? And know if the food's going to get there. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you secure communities would rebuild local food systems?
Yeah, that's interesting how all this talk about national security and food security very rarely enters the conversation. We can't feed ourselves. That seems pretty fundamental.
Yeah, food security, food sovereignty, food security is It shouldn't be a political issue. It's a common sense issue. Y'all want to trust getting your food from California? Good luck. Besides that, they're using fracking water to irrigate those fields.
Sure.
You know, I mean, it's you know, American agriculture is a ridiculous and dangerous situation. And, you know, and people talk about it as conventional agriculture. No, it's an aberration of 10,000 years of agriculture. People used to grow things, and in fact, most of the world still grows their own food, and 70% of the world's food is produced by people like me, not by Kraft, Monsanto, and Syngenta. You know, most of the world's food is actually produced in our own communities by people. A lot of them are women. You know, so I'm a proponent of relocalizing food. You know, and then you figure out your trade agreements that are just and fair. And then some things you just gotta, you know, you're just not gonna do. Like I have a hard time. I really like avocados. You know, I just don't think that's going to happen in
They're
my.
not grown in northern Minnesota.
Right. In my, you know, if I went on a strict carbon diet, I wouldn't have avocados. I like coconuts too. I really like Thai food. You know? I mean, you know what I'm saying is, it's like,
it's hard to be absolute.
You could have like,
much.
but that coconuts you could transport more easily. You know what I'm saying?
They got a longer shelf life.
Right, and you could and also you could, like, you know, bottle them or can them and ship them by boat. Or, you know what I'm saying? It's like
You're reminding me of a little aside. I used to visit my grandparents. I grew up in New England. My grandparents would lived in Florida, and we go visit them, and I'd send friends coconuts, but you just like write the address.
Oh, right. I
and
remember
put a
those.
stamp on it.
Yeah,
You could
yeah.
actually mail a coconut.
Yeah, I remember that. Those
Anyway,
were cool.
hugely inefficient, but
you know, at some level, yeah. I mean, and I'm a bit of a local harvester. I mean, I have a local harvester with a plane ticket. You know, I mean, which is like, you know, I mean, it's a contradiction that is entertaining but true. Like I go, I brought some trade goods. I brought some wild rice. I was hoping to head back with some elk meat or some, you know, I don't have elk.
we can set you up.
Yeah. I'm just, you know what I'm saying is like, that's what I do is I like that kind of a trade system, but it's like, you know, it's kind of a joke because you got to have a plane ticket to do it.
Right.
But, you know, so so basically I see local energy in the time of power outages. I mean, I'm going to be lecturing about it later today, but, you know, just take a little look.
Yeah.
The grid's going down. Grid's going to keep going down. So why wouldn't you, Montana, want to relocalize your grid?
And
You know?
that,
And maybe
I mean,
you
that's
are.
another.
You probably are, right? I mean,
we're trying to. I mean, that's another story of national security too.
Right.
You know, if we have this, you know, one piece of infrastructure that's hackable.
ailing.
Yeah.
I mean, look at PG&E and the campfire.
Right.
I mean, that was power lines, right?
So, you know, I would assume northern Minnesota, things like wind power would be a great option.
Wind and solar.
Yeah.
You know, we are building a solar thermal panel manufacturing facility. It's called Eighth Fire Solar.
Okay.
Because
like
every
that.
time I say solar thermal panel manufacturing, that's like a lot of descriptions. But basically, south-facing wall of your house, you put one of these 8x4 panels on. Montana is like Minnesota. It's cold, but sunny, right? Mm-hmm. And so when it's sunny, that heat still gathers in that panel. And then that panel, when it hits like 90 degrees in the panel, turns on the thermostat, flips the heater fan, and then the fan blows the hot air into the house. Interesting, saves 20 to 30% of your winter heating bill. Now, why wouldn't you want to save it? You know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm trying to address fuel poverty in northern Minnesota. We are coming online. We just are finishing the final construction. We will be online by April, selling solar thermal panels nationally. You know, we're going to start Minnesota. You know, it doesn't matter. I already got a lot of orders, but you know, so I see crisis as opportunity, and transition is essential. I mean, that's the fact is that if you want to survive, you got to make some transitions, and there's some pretty cool opportunities to do great stuff. So why wouldn't we want to do that? You know, instead of waiting for, you know, our future to be handed to us by the Trump administration. Who wants to do that? There's going to be a post-Trump era. I plan to be here.
Yeah. And so how are you helping people make these transitions in your community? How are you helping them install solar or decide that they're going to start growing hemp or other choices to relocalize their energy and food?
You know, basically, I'm kind of like a community development economist in my village.
Right.
I mean, in my tribe. I mean, I don't work for the tribe. I direct Honor the Earth, which is a national nonprofit. And we just started Anishinaabe Agriculture Institute, and that's working on hemp. And that's, you know, the third example is hemp. I mean, there's more examples, but hemp. As I said, I'm a fiber hemp farmer, and I'm going to build a mill.
Okay.
And the mill that I'm going to build is pretty entertaining. It's kind of like that Johnny Cash song, one piece at a time. Because I've got some pieces, it's vintage equipment that came out of New England. And where I'm talking about. I got a Sacco, some piece of equipment like from Sacco and Vanzetti.
Oh,
Do you know
yeah.
what I'm talking about? The Lowell. I got like massive.
All the old mill towns.
Like I have like all this cool stuff that I'm going to move into northern Minnesota and process fiber. And I'd like to make something for textiles because, Minnesota used to have 11 hemp mills.
Wow.
How interesting is that?
Yeah.
11 hemp mills. We grew all our own clothes and we made all our own rope. Go figure. And that was before, remember they used to call it petroleum byproducts, plastics?
Yep.
They were called petroleum byproducts. You know what I'm saying? Now we don't refer to them as that. They've had their own identities like nylon.
Uh-huh.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Synthetic
but
fibers, all these things.
Right. They became like beings unto themselves. Well, they're all basically petroleum byproducts.
Right.
And so if in the post-petroleum era, you might want to go to something that's been growing for thousands of years. And the word canvas comes from cannabis.
Right. Okay.
So why wouldn't you want to just do something cool like organic canvas? And so that's,
And we'll explain why it's a better crop than cotton per se to be growing.
Twice the fiber per acre.
Okay.
Twice the fiber
And
per
much
acre.
less
No
water,
pesticides
right?
and no water. I mean, basically, I grow dryland farm, which dryland farming in Minnesota is a little different than dryland farming probably in eastern Montana.
Right.
But it's a very forgiving crop. And I understand there's some guys here that are growing hemp. To be super honest, the next economy should not look like the last economy. That's to say, I've been at hemp meetings and I was at a state hemp meeting as a bunch of guys that are trying to figure out how to put glyphosate on their hemp. And I was like, that's not going to happen.
Glyphosate, is that a pesticide?
Yeah, it's the stuff that gives like Roundup.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Is like there's some dumb ideas that continue, and we're just going to have to shake that out of them.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds kind of aggressive, but, I'm just saying we're moving on into organic. Why would you want to add, something that ends with side? Pesticide, herbicide, fungicide, side. That's the same suffix as in suicide, homicide, and genocide. Why would you put stuff like that on your food? Dumb people that do dumb things, and their ideas are sold by corporations. So I'm ready to move on. I guess you hear that. And so we're doing it. And then people talk, relocalization is an essential part of it. But don't diminish the significance of that, because relocalization in 25,000 communities is what the change is going to be made. If you think that the change is going to be made in Washington, you're going to live a sad life.
Yeah, okay.
We're going to change in Washington because we're going to deal with voter suppression, and we're going to get people out to vote. Minnesota had the highest turnout of a midterm election in history of any state. We did that. We drove people to the damn polls that couldn't, we're natives. You couldn't use your address. Yeah, there you go. Just like that North Dakota decision. Do you know what I'm talking about? We couldn't even, people living in the village had to go drive into town. It's ridiculous. So we're going to fix that for the next election. And then we're going to make sure that some good people are in Washington, and I don't know that much about Montana politics, but I was, Tester, I know, has been pretty good proponent for a lot of these things. And so, we just need more, I'm just saying we need more enlightened people. And to be honest, probably a few more women and Native people of color in Congress, because that 85% white guys thing, that's not going to work out. Those guys made a lot of bad decisions already. I think that their access cards should be pulled, frankly.
Do you think about, I'm
sorry, but I was just
no,
you just look at these
that's
things
fair.
and you're like, wow, y'all, you should just I work with a lot of enlightened people and I love everybody. I was love everybody, including some super white guys. I love them too. Cause it's all good if you're good, but if you got to carry your damn bags around and we got to porter them for you, give me a break.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
done.
a problem.
I'm done.
Along those lines, you've been on 2 vice presidential tickets. Do you think about running again?
No.
No, not interested.
I feel like, people are asking me all the time, but I was like,
Sure.
no. First of all, I have 17 horses.
It's a lot of horses.
Right. I'm moving into the goat cheese thing. I want to do goat cheese. My retirement plan is to raise make goat cheese, and raise hemp, fiber hemp. I'm working on it, At 60, I'm working on the next plan, right?
That's a pretty good plan.
Yeah, I like it. I'm like the relocalization and, so anyway, I'm doing that. And, why would I want to go get a headache? But I go, it's, as you likely know, I show up when
Yeah,
they ask me.
absolutely.
If they need me to testify in Washington, I show up. If they need me to testify in Minnesota, I show up. Because I want the system to work. I totally want the system to work. But I myself am a rural person.
Okay.
I spent most of my life in rural areas, and I just really,
It's where you want to be.
I don't really got an interest in living in an urban area. I just don't,
Well, I suppose, if you're committed to relocalization and committed to your community, there for some there is this draw to run for office, but then you're in Washington, and then you're in that system, and then you're not sort of living the life that you're trying to promote within your community.
Well, and it's also kind of who has the stomach for that.
Yeah, that's true.
Or the
too.
stomach or the acumen. I'm like, if you got that, honey, you go. I'll support you.
Okay.
That's me. I'm like 100% behind. The new Native women who got elected. I was like, I seen Deb Howland when I was down in. She's from New Mexico, and I was like, I saw her, and I was like, you go, girl. And every time there's somebody new and visionary elected to Congress or to a state, I'm like 100% behind them. Because some people got that gift. Like there's a woman who got elected in North Dakota. Her name's Ruth Anna Buffalo.
Okay.
She's a Mandan Arikara woman. And she unseated the guy who passed the legislation that denied Indian people who didn't have a street address the right to vote in North Dakota. I don't know if you remember this case, but I think the Supreme Court ruled that they could do that. And so, North Dakota, all those Indian people who went to the rural post office are not just Indian people. Like a lot of white people in rural areas have to go to the post office. They don't have mail delivery, right?
Yeah.
Denied him the right to vote. But she unseated him. So I'm saying, and she's introduced a piece of legislation that I don't know if it passed yet, but on having a tracking system for missing and murdered Indigenous women. So I want to see those people get elected. If you've got that fire in your belly to go make this democracy work in those halls, you do it. I'm going to make it work at home. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to practice democracy. I'm going to practice governance with my tribe. And I'm Anishinaabe, and I live on the reservation. That's what I'm going to do.
Right. And it sounds like what you're describing is you're playing a new game. Right? The old game is broken, and not interested in playing that game.
Well, I'm just following that instruction that we had at the seventh fire, and it's called lighting the eighth fire.
Okay.
I'm going to make that. We're going to do that. And that's, I'm actually writing a book on it now. But, my point is that you need to, it's a new economy. It's a new economy for all of us, but it's predicated on land-based values, which everybody used to have those until they became a bunch of transients who worked for corporations. There was a day when people's grandparents lived in the same place and they could taste the soil. German farmers, they talked about tasting the soil.
Okay.
And this was German farmers like in Wisconsin. And I was like, that's so interesting. But that's the people that we all used to be.
That level of connection.
Right.
Yeah.
Just saying, and whatever color, people used to have a connection. And then in the past 20 and 30 years, we've gotten super distant. The nature deficit disorder. Most people spend most of their time looking at a screen that's about, 3x6.
Yeah.
And they don't even connect. They don't even connect. You could go in a room of, you and I know it. I could go in my household and there'll be, a visiting bunch of people, and half of them are 20 and they're not even talking to each other. They're all looking at their phones in my house. I'm like, wow, that's so baffling to me. Our ancestors navigated by the stars, and you can't walk out without a GPS.
Most people can't see the stars because there's so much light pollution.
Right. But last night, when we flew into Missoula, I couldn't see the stars.
Yeah, probably not too many.
I was like, thank God there's a shuttle to jump into. Right?
Yes, wise move. So how do you view situations where, you've mentioned situations where, you're mobilizing your community, and if I recall, you sort of said, and some white people were interested in that too. And so how do you view situations where the objectives of the tribal community align with the white community and when they don't? in terms of mobilizing whatever coalition you're trying to mobilize?
Nobody in Minnesota wants that pipeline. 68,000 people came out and testified, and most of those were white people.
Right, so that's relatively unifying.
Yeah, and that was like a multiracial alliance that defeated the Sandpiper, which was Enbridge's first proposal for our state.
Okay.
Which is a fracked oil pipeline out of North Dakota. And so, we built a multiracial alliance because we all drink the same water and we live on the lakes. And I have to say that my past 5 years of pipeline fighting, I'm a water protector. That's what I refer to myself as, a water protector. I met a lot of amazing people that we would have never met, and we've all been traumatized by the state of Minnesota, and I'm hoping that we aren't all shot at this summer if we don't win in our regulatory system.
Sure.
But they'll be right there with me, and so I'm interested in multiracial alliances, and to be honest with you, I actually think that once enlightened, let me just put it that way, then a lot of non-Indian people will support, what we're doing. Just have to be honest with you, like growing hemp, people used to kind of pull away. I have 3 years, a state permit, state of Minnesota. I can't grow marijuana, can't grow anything with THC in it, only hemp. 3 years, a state issued permit for that. And, so I'm growing and my tribe is growing, has a hemp plot, and I took over my tribe's hemp plot and I'm expanding that out. But, one day I'm in my yard and my farm, I bought a hemp farm last year, and this cop pulls in.
Okay.
And everybody scatters.
Not a reservation cop, state trooper or something like that.
Yeah, pulls in. And we didn't know. It was like an unmarked police car, but they pull in and everybody scatters because, God only knows. And I go walk over to the guy and he's like, hey, I've been trying to bend your ear. That's what he said. He said, I've been trying to catch you. He said, I drive by this house, your farm all the time. I have a big marijuana leaf on my barn. He says, I want to grow hemp.
Interesting.
He says, I want to grow hemp. How do I do that? He says, I got 300 acres. We used to farm, we're organic. We used to do dairy. We're not doing dairy now. I was like, give me a couple of years. I'll figure that out. And you come and see me. So, I feel like people want, in Minnesota, I talk to the state agencies, regulatory officials, the new governor. I said, look, you want an economy that people don't fight over. How about we do something that we all agree on, like organic agriculture?
Yeah.
The people who want a pipeline, that's a short-term job, and everybody knows that. Mm-hmm. It's a Canadian multinational. Why are you going to subject your democracy to the whims of a Canadian multinational who doesn't have a plan B? I'm not doing it. So, there's a lot of people that are all with it. And I have to say, people stop me in the store all the time. Non-Indian people stop me right in the grocery store and say, thank you.
Sure.
How do I sign up?
Yeah, so that's my next question.
That's a super interesting moment.
How's a guy like me or somebody listening, learning about these issues for the first time, or how do you become enlightened?
Well, first of all, y'all got the opportunity. You can look at our stuff at Honor the Earth or Winona's Hemp. A lot of the issues around hemp, are emergent everywhere. I'm saying, please don't put glyphosate on your hemp. Please don't put pesticides and herbicides on it. Just let that be. Those girls grow. If you want to, I want agriculture that has life in it, not death.
Yeah, and so thinking about that, you said you can't grow THC or marijuana on your property. Yet there is this emerging cannabis industry.
Yeah.
And there's some effort, that you take the Colorado example, and they're taxing it heavily and raising money for presumably some good things, maybe not all good things, but it's a revenue generator for the state. And this is an example of somewhere where we could have the next economy.
Montana should legalize.
We could have this next economy you're describing, yet at the same time, multinationals, large corporations, pharmaceutical industry could move in and swoop it all up.
I feel like, put on your big boy panties or your big girl panties,
okay.
Montana. Do it right. I think that you need to support local, what you want is a renaissance and a revitalization of organic farming, or you want farmers here to benefit from it. And, I understand that you had a legalized marijuana industry at the beginning of it, and then it got closed down by the state. And so then who gets to grow? A bunch of multinationals? I don't know. But Minnesota also has a medical marijuana, and they only have a couple of producers, and I think that they should open that up. I think tribal people should. And I'm going to be super honest with you, as an economist, I'm so geeky. I was so I go ask all the dealers on White Earth. Not all of them, but, everybody talks to me. I was so how much you sell? How much you sell a week?
Uh-huh.
And you start looking at that, and, so say you got a tribe that spends $4 million a year on purchasing marijuana from the Oregon and Mexican and Colorado cartels or whoever. Like, that's a hemorrhage to your community.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? If you grew it locally, that money would stay local. And in fact, if you didn't have to buy it because you could grow it yourself, you could develop a relationship with those plants, which is what a lot of it is about, is relationship. If you think you can just purchase everything and you're going to be well, you're wrong. And everybody here knows that. You can't just keep buying stuff to get well. At some point, you have to go a little deeper. And I actually I'm a proponent that you should grow your own. I grow CBDs. I grow industrial hemp, but, I grew CBDs this last year, first time. And I didn't know anything about it. I was like, oh my God. Like, I never grew marijuana. I was like, oh my God, they're turning into boys. There's the sex, there's plant sex.
Yeah,
but, those plants were happy. And everybody's looking forward to it again, because people would come and just go stand in my field. I'm just talking like a little garden patch.
Sure.
Scale it appropriately. Quit trying to be like mega capitalists. That's foundationally wrong. This plant is an opportunity to rebuild a relationship with, and the plant is so versatile, from everything from the hemp seeds, my pesto sauce. That's what I do. I make hemp heart pesto. Super
hemp
good.
heart pesto with some of your basil there.
Yeah, with local hemp hearts, right?
Ooh,
and so then you have a
nice.
local hemp. You know what I'm saying? It's what if you took that fabulous recipe, and I don't have pine nuts. You know what I'm saying? I used to use cashews. I was like, oh, those don't even grow near here. I was like, well, what could I use? Well, I could use hazelnuts. But then I was like, well, I'm growing hemp. It's got a super meaty flavor. Not meaty. I'm just saying it's a rich oil. It's a rich nut. Or a rich. So, do cool stuff. Don't be like a jerk and try to make a bunch of money off of everything. Make a living, not a killing. Make a living, not a killing.
I like that. Do cool stuff. Make a living, not a killing. That seems like the path to enlightenment right there. Connection.
Yeah.
With all these things we're talking about.
Yeah. It's like how you want to live. You want to live. It's like super stressful being a capitalist jerk.
It's a hard life.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, I look at those guys and I'm like, you look just damn miserable.
Yeah.
I was like, why would you want to do that? And of course I have to spend a lot of time fighting their stupid, miserable selves. But I was like, why don't you just be like, a little more chill?
Yeah, smile once
Smile
or twice.
once, hang out with your plants, quit trying to exploit everything. It's like way less stressful. To me, that's kind of like, the Dalai Lama's approach. It's like be kind, be happy.
Yeah.
That's the next economy looks like that.
I like that.
Yeah.
Winona, this seems like a great place to end it, and you've got a busy day ahead of you on campus. Hugely thankful for the time we were able to spend together and you sharing your ideas and passion. Final question would be, if anybody listening wants to get more involved, you've mentioned your website, Honor the Earth, or your organization,
and Winona's
Honor the Earth.
Hemp. If you want to help me capitalize the hemp, they call it the Hempire.
The Hempire.
The Hempire.
So how do people find your work?
Yeah, at Winona's Hemp is on, I think that we have both winonashemp.org on, and then we also have on my Facebook was Winona's Hemp, and we have I have to say a Kickstarter. I just started. It's not a Kickstarter. It's a fundraiser for this. I did raise money last year for buying for buying some farmland, but and then just think about these things. And tonight I'm going to be lecturing, but the longer term stuff is under Honor the Earth, and then the other thing I'm going to be starting to broach the topic of, I just have to say, is this solutionary rail.
Okay.
Having electric trains and using the transmission lines along the rail to move your renewable energy from Montana.
I like that.
Solutionary rail. Look it up online. It's super interesting. I just started researching.
Yeah,
Solutionary rail.
We'll post some links to all this stuff in the show notes.
Yeah, there's people thinking and there's people doing. And Montana, we don't want to be the last ones to learn about how to solve problems. We want to be we want to do it, so.
Awesome.
Cool.
Winona, thanks for being here. Thanks for all your work, and good luck.
Thank you, Miigwech.
All right, that was certainly fun, wasn't it? Thanks to Winona for sharing her wisdom and her passion. And check out her organization, Honor the Earth, at honorearth.org. Okay, coming up next week, we have Missoula author Jeremy Smith, whose recent book, Breaking and Entering, has enjoyed tremendous early success. Stay tuned. Thanks for listening to New Angle. We really appreciate it. And we're coming to you from Studio 49, part of the Michelle and Lauren Hansen Media Lab at the University of Montana College of Business. Remember that this podcast was supported by CED, Consolidated Electrical Distributors. These guys pretty much sell anything electrical you'd ever need, but they also hire a ton of our students. If you want to learn more about jobs at CED, visit cedcareers.com. Before we go, I want to thank some important peeps. Executive producer, Stefan Borsum. Producer, Aidan Morton. And interns, Aspen Runkle, Max Gibson, and Ellie Hanasek. Huge thanks to VTO, Jeff Ament, and John Wicks for the tunes. And finally, props to Jeff Meest, our master of all things sound. Finally, if you have any questions, suggestions, comments, insults, whatever, please email me at anewangle@umontana.edu. Help us spread the word and be sure to use the hashtag #anewangle when you do. Thanks a lot. See you next time.